members of the panel, moderator, members of the organization of Compass, and members of my fellow members of my department. We start off this business today, and my duty is to welcome you all to this function this Sunday morning. It's a great privilege to extend a warm welcome to all of you, to this great institution you have all come from distant places, and you know more about this organization. And it is an intellectual engagement that we are going to have this morning. And the topic, as you are all aware, is decolonizing feminism, exploring religion. And the topic is increasingly relevant today when the Western discourse is invariably dwelling on them as the center of the world. And the topic decolonizing feminism would also mean decentering feminism. And we have the right resource person for the purpose. And I don't have to speak much about them because they are all familiar to you. But still, as a matter of official duty, let me say a few words about our great member and the resource person of this meeting this morning, Dr. Varsha Basheer. Dr. Varsha Basheer has obtained a doctorate in English at the University of Kerala. She has been teaching English as second language for undergraduates, and she is actively engaged in intellectual activities of this kind. She is also associated with literary representations and ideas. She is speaking against and countering Islamophobia. She is currently affiliated faculty and visiting fellow with the Islamophobia Research and Documentation Project run by the Center for Race and Gender, University of California, Berkeley, USA. Her research interests include critical media studies, comparative religious studies, religious pluralism, secular modernity, and so on. She intends to pursue postdoctoral research in women's studies in religion and focus on Muslim women in India. So let me first of all welcome Dr. Varsha Basheer to this function. Welcome to you, madam. Now the second important resource person we have here is Dr. Abida Farooqi, a friend of mine and a syndicate member till recently. She is currently an associate professor with the Department of English, PTM Government College, Perudamana. And she has made a lot of contributions to various journals and periodicals. She has also been associated with so many international seminars. So let me also welcome Dr. Farooqi to this meeting. And the third resource person we have here is Dr. Tajuddin Wafi. He is a principal of Grace Valley Islamic Arts College, Kadambuya. And he is the assistant coordinator of the Coordination of Islamic Colleges. He did his PhD from Cairo University, Egypt. He has made a lot of articles. He has contributed a lot of articles in various journals, presented papers in international seminars in India and abroad. So we have also in our midst the moderator, my student, Najida, right? And I hope that this morning we will have a happy session and these resource persons will throw light on various aspects of this topic, decolonizing feminism, and I leave it to the moderator to start off the business. Thank you.
Respected chief guests, the panel members, HOD, the academic gathering here. A very good morning to one and all here. Let us get into the program. I mean the academic impression straight away. So, I welcome Varsha ma'am to talk on this, our main title, the Decolonial Feminism, Exploring Religion as a Methodology.
Assalamu alaikum and good morning to all. Let me first of all begin by thanking such a vibrant group as Compass for arranging this specific talk over here, not going through the arrangements just once, but actually doing it twice. The first time getting cancelled, but the location was different. So now as we again convene here to talk on this said subject, I am even more glad that the Postgraduate Department of English of Farouk College, the esteemed institution in Kerala, as partnering with this event. And beyond that, since midnight yesterday, I think God has brought many more people that I should thank for actually sitting here today at the specified time, speaking to you all without much physical discomfort. So, getting over with that pleasant formality, let's come to the business of talking about this subject, which I think is an important addition to the current ongoing discussions that we are finding in universities. Our young community has started, if we are to consider Indian Brahmin Savana nation as a colony, then I think whatever the theories that I am going to talk about here would equally apply not just to the Western world, but you would be able to think along with me regarding how we can see even our own nation and the way our nationality is built needs to be decolonized, or let's say de-Brahmanized, so that there are multiple existences possible. Pardon me if I sound a bit out of my element, but anyway, I think with that small mishap, now I have got a reason for putting whatever lapses I have made in my research and saying, okay, this happened because I went through a difficult time, so some points I have missed, some points. I think that is going to help me. So I have thought to go about making this presentation by beginning with an introduction to decolonial theories or decoloniality as such, so that when I come on to what means a decolonial feminism, it will be more easier to catch up with rather than me saying this is decolonial feminism, this, and then saying, okay, these are the inherent ideas. That will be the first part of the talk. And the second part, I intend to introduce or produce a small overview of the main theorists whom I believe, or feminist theorists whom I believe has contributed towards this new emerging hyphenated feminism. And in the third part, I intend to look at how, or rather question whether Islamic Muslim feminism can be called a decolonial tool, or can we think of feminisms or assertions, gender assertions coming out of such a subject location as having a decolonial possibility. So let me begin. Decolonial thinking has existed since the very inception of modern forms of colonization, that is, since at least the late 15th and early 16th centuries, and to that extent a certain decolonial turn has existed as well. But the more massive and possibly more profound shift away from modernization towards decoloniality as an unfinished project took place in the 20th century and is still unfolding now. This more substantial decolonial turn was announced by W.E.B. Du Bois in the early 20th century and made explicit in a line of figures that goes from Amy Césaire and Frantz Fanon to Sylvia Winter, Enric Dussel, Gloria Anzaldua, Roman Grossfogel, Edgardo Lander, Maria Lugones, Walter Mignolo, Annabel Fujano, among others. So is also the case with Caribbean scholars such as Louise Gordon, Bridget Henry, Sylvia Winter, and black feminists like Sojourner Truth and Audre Lorde. Also Muslim scholars like Talal Asad, Hamid Dabashi, Salman Said, Houria Boutelldja, Farid Essaq have been important interlocutors and have contributed with important ideas and developments to the understanding of colonial modernity and decoloniality. There have been and there are differences and tensions among figures and movements that advance this decolonial turn. The decolonial turn does not refer to a single theoretical school, but rather points to a family of diverse positions that share a view of coloniality as a fundamental problem in the modern age and of decolonization or decoloniality as a necessary task that remains unfinished. These theorists have clearly mapped the hegemonic Eurocentric paradigms that have informed Western philosophy and sciences in the modern colonial capitalist patriarchal world system for the last 500 years, which assume a universalistic, neutral, objective point of view, thus masking the nexus of colonial modernity in perpetrating ever-rising inequalities and oppression. They describe it as coloniality or colonial matrix of power, which is a global structure of management and control that continues even today, even after the end of colonialism per se. Coloniality conceptualizes the totalizing colonial nature of power within modernity. Coloniality of power is made of intertwined hierarchies of culture, race, class, sexual orientation, age, ethnicity, gender, and cosmologies. Through this matrix, the colonial difference is translated into nationalized hierarchies of power whose original yet mobile configuration is white, capitalist, masculine, heterosexual, Christian dominance. Our available conception of the global is thereby constrained within Eurocentric coordinates by the coloniality of method. The Peruvian sociologist Annabel Crujano, and pardon me if I am pronouncing a few names wrong over here, as they belong to different locations. The Peruvian sociologist Aníbal Trujillo, in his 1989 article titled Coloniality and Modernity Rationality, explicitly linked coloniality of power in the political and economic spheres with the coloniality of knowledge. Taking a step further from Trujillo, Ramon Grossfugel conceptualizes the coloniality of power as an entanglement, or, to use the US third world feminist concept, intersectionality of multiple and heterogeneous global hierarchies of sexual, political, epistemic, economic, spiritual, linguistic, and racial forms of domination and exploitation, where the racial ethnic hierarchy of the European non-European divide transversely reconfigures all of the other global power structures. What is new is the coloniality of power perspective is how the idea of race and racism becomes the organizing principle that structures all of the multiple hierarchies of the world system. For example, the different forms of labor that are articulated to capitalist accumulation at a world scale are assigned according to this racial hierarchy. Coercive or cheap labor is done by non-European people in the periphery, and free wage labor is in the core. The global gender hierarchy is also affected by race and location. Contrary to the Eurocentric perspective, race, gender, sexuality, spirituality, and epistemology are not additive elements to the economic and political structures of the capitalist world system, but an integral and entangled part of the broad package called the European modern colonial capitalist patriarchal world system. And as Trujillo argues, if knowledge is colonized, one of the tasks ahead is to decolonize knowledge. So, decolonizing genealogy is a heuristic strategy deployed against the coloniality of method. To succinctly state this in the words of Walter Mignolo, the colonial matrix of power is a complex structure that we describe as 5 interrelated domains: the domains of knowledge and subjectivity, of the economy of authority or politics, of gender and sexuality, and of the natural world, that is, in which our bodies are the part and what constitute our constant becoming as human being organized in communities like Khilafats, empires, monarchies, churches, mosques, nation-states, inter-community relationships, etc. You see why the spheres of feeling and sensibilities, the Greeks call it aesthetics, which was colonized by the modern philosophy, turned into aesthetics, a theory to control taste. Remember, as I said before, that there is not such a thing as the colonial matrix of power before the 16th century. This is from Mignolo. You cannot find it in ancient China, in ancient India and Persia, in ancient African kingdoms, in ancient Greece, in Rome, in the Islamic Caliphate, or in the Andean incanties. The colonial matrix of power is precisely what allowed the West to build itself as overcoming all existing civilizations in the name of modernity. Another important theory that goes along with, or a related theory which these authors have developed, engaging with the work, the decolonial theories put forward by these authors, is the body politics of knowledge. Chicana and black feminist scholars like Anzaldua, Collins, etc., as well as third world scholars inside and outside the United States, remind us that we always speak from a particular location in the power structures. Nobody escapes the class, sexual, gender, spiritual, linguistic, geographical, and racial hierarchies of the modern colonial capitalist patriarchal world system. As Donna Haraway states, our knowledges are always situated. Black feminist scholars call this perspective Afrocentric epistemology, while Latin American philosopher of liberation Enrique Dussel called it geopolitics of knowledge. And following Fanon and Anzaldua, Grossfugel uses the term body politics of knowledge. This is not only a question about social values in knowledge production or the fact that our knowledge is always partial. The main point here is the locus of enunciation, who we speak as, that is, the geopolitical and body political location of the subject that speaks. In Western philosophy and sciences, the subject that speaks is always hidden, concealed, erased from the analysis. The ego politics of knowledge of Western philosophy has always privileged the myth of a non-situated ego. By delinking ethnic, racial, gender, sexual, epistemic location from the subject that speaks, Western philosophy and sciences are able to produce a myth about a truthful universal knowledge that covers up, that is, conceals who is speaking, as well as the geopolitical and body political epistemic location in the structures of colonial power knowledge from which the subject speaks. It is important here to distinguish between the epistemic location and the social location. The fact that one is socially located in the oppressed side of power relations does not automatically mean that he or she is epistemically thinking from a subaltern epistemic location. Precisely, the success of the modern colonial world system consists in making the subjects that are socially located in the oppressed side of the colonial difference to think epistemically like the ones on the dominant positions. Subaltern epistemic perspectives are knowledge coming from the below that produces a critical perspective of hegemonic knowledge in the power relations involved. I am not claiming, and this is a direct quote from Grossvogel, I am not claiming an epistemic populism where knowledge produced from below is automatically an epistemically subaltern knowledge. What I am claiming is that all knowledges are epistemically located in the dominant or the subaltern side of the power relations, and that this is related to the geo and body politics of knowledge. The disembodied and unlocated neutrality and objectivity of the ego politics of knowledge is a Western myth, what the Colombian philosopher Santiago Castro Gomez called the point zero perspective of Eurocentric philosophies. It hides and conceals itself as being beyond a particular point of view. It is this God's eye view that always hides its local and particular perspective under an abstract universalism. At this point, whenever I am talking about these ideas, I would also like the audience to think through if this is being applied in an Indian scenario, what would an example be? And I would say, just to go with this, if we were to think about the debate on reservations, what would have been, how we could have managed to saying those were about representation, but it gets termed as a reservation. And then the whole debate, even as earlier I was describing, even people who are availing scholarships are made, or representation is made to feel like, okay, I am doing something wrong, to make them feel ashamed that, okay, this is what, ideally it is something that is being given to us because it is our, to say it, hak hai, it is something that belongs to us. It was something that was taken away from us and it is being taken back. And then the whole discourse surrounding is supposed to hear, like, from this ego-centric point of view, or from this neutral, which masks itself as neutral, the whole dominant concept evolves, wherein it is looked upon, or reservations are supposed to be looked upon as something that is a crime. Okay. Moving on from there, historically this has allowed the Western man to represent his knowledge as the only one capable of achieving a universal consciousness and to dismiss non-Western knowledge as particularistic and thus unable to achieve universality. The epistemic strategy has been crucial for Western global designs by hiding the location of the subject of enunciation European, Euro-American colonial expansion and domination was able to construct a hierarchy of superior and inferior knowledge, and thus of superior and inferior people around the world. Linking this to the very another related concept of identity politics, something that Walter Mignolo speaks on this, I thought it is important in this context. He demarcates identity politics and champions for identity in politics. He explains, identity in politics is relevant not only because identity politics is all over the spectrum of social identities, but because the control of identity politics lies precisely in the construction of an identity that doesn't look as such, but as the natural appearance of the world. That is, whiteness, or in Indian context, Brahminness or Savarna Hinduness, heterosexuality and manhood are the main features of an identity politics that denounces similar but opposing identities as essential and fundamentalists. However, the dominant identity politics doesn't manifest itself as such, but through abstract universals such as science, philosophy, Christianity, liberalism, and of course Marxism. I will argue that identity in politics, or rather Mignolo is arguing, and I agree with him, is crucial for any decolonial action, since without building political theories and organizing political actions that are grounded on identities that have been allocated by imperial discourses, it may not be possible to denaturalize the imperial and racial construction of identity in the modern world under capitalist economy. Identities constructed by European modern discourses were racial and patriarchal, and he staunchly reiterates that identity in politics, in summary, is the only way to think decolonially, which means to think politically in decolonial terms and projects. So in short, to summarize a lot of the theories that falls under this particular domain, what does this political project entail? One, it makes clear precisely that master paradigms and abstract universals, whether from the left, right, or center, are still caught in imperial desires. There are several histories, all simultaneous histories, interconnected by imperial and colonial powers, by imperial and colonial differences. Third, it urges that the decolonial option requires a different type of thinking, a nonlinear and chronological epistemological break. It requires border epistemology, an epistemic disobedience, a non-capitalist political economy, and a plurinational, that is, a non-mono-national concept of the state. 4. The decolonial option opens up as delinking and negativity from the perspective of the spaces that have been silenced, repressed, demonized, devaluated by the triumphant chant of self-promoting modern epistemology, politics, and economy and its internal dissensions. Even of those kinds such as the honest liberals, theologians of liberation, postmoderns and post-structuralists, Marxists of different brands. And fifth, and finally, consequently, the decolonial option means, among other things, learning to unlearn, since brains have been programmed by the imperial colonial reason. So, having very quickly, I think it was quick, but I don't know, maybe all of you have been feeling a bit uneasy with me reading through all these stuff. Now I would like to provide an overview of feminisms that have come up from different epistemic locations, from different vocal locations, which has been trying to bring forward a challenge to Western white imperial feminist notions. Since its inception, Western feminism has existed as a site of exclusion on multiple fronts, a consequence of first wave feminist assumptions, though it evolved during the second and third waves to somewhat address the race and class questions. There is little doubt that many of its assumptions have changed little over time. White feminism has increasingly shown its coloniality of method and increasingly operates on behalf of the Western Empire. It operates on behalf of the hierarchies of culture, class, race, sexual orientation, age, ethnicity, gender, and cosmologies. Black feminism, Latin American feminism, indigenous feminisms, Islamic Muslim feminisms pose an epistemic challenge to these feminist colonial modernity agendas. Indian post-colonial feminist theory, in my opinion, falls short of a decolonial position due to its lack of self-reflexivity, though articulated from a subaltern subject position. As Paula Bacchetta notes, post-colonial theory is useful. It deconstructs many things, it explains many things, but it suffers from an incomplete analysis of power. Decolonial feminisms and post-colonial feminisms as intellectual formations do not have exactly the same preoccupations historically or currently. Intersectionality remains the key feature of decolonial feminist analysis concerned with decentering of the normative subject of feminism. Such decentering activities scaled new heights when fueled by political energies generated by the social movements of the second half of the last century, anti-colonial movements for independence, civil rights, and the Black Power movements, students' protests, and the worker movements, the gay and lesbian movements, etc. Whichever set of hegemonic moves became the focus of contestation in a specific debate, whether it was the plight of subordinated sexualities, class injustices, or other subaltern realities, the concept of a self-referencing unified subject of modernity now became the subject of overt and explicit political critique. The foremost feminist decolonial challenge recorded against Western feminist designs, in my opinion, remains Sojourner Truth's famous speech, Ain't I a Woman?, which critiqued the exclusion of black women from the mainstream white feminist movement. Truth's speech, part lament, part defiant, articulated razor-sharp politics performing the analytical moves of a decolonized mind. Sojourner Truth, or Isabella, who was a slave during the 1850s, powerfully challenged essentialist thinking that a particular category of woman is essentially this or that. Tracing the lineage of decolonial feminist thought indeed takes us through black feminist articulations and struggles primarily. Audre Lorde, the African-American feminist author and academist, had famously quipped, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house." Lorde's advocacy demonstrated her understanding of how privilege and oppression can combine in each person's life situation, influenced as she was by Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed, among other intellectual sources. In a 1980 speech, for instance, Lorde listed distortions around human differences used to exclude work by women of color from the curriculum. And she states, all too often the excuse given is that the literatures of women of color can only be taught by the colored woman, or they are too difficult to understand, or that classes cannot get into them because they come out of experiences that are too different. Her works encouraged a reflection on how scholars can misuse privilege by disengagement or protection in ways that uncritically preserve power rather than examine how it can be used to learn constructively from human differences to advance social justice. Her collection of essays, speeches, and letters, which was published as a book, Sister Outsider, in 1984, expressed Lorde's assertion that her identity as a black woman, lesbian, mother of a daughter and a son, poet, and partner in a racially mixed relationship provided her a unique vision as both a sister and an outsider, which can be used as a catalyst for change. Sylvia Winter is another black feminist, a Jamaican dramatist, critic, and academist who has contributed directly to the discourse of decoloniality. In her essay titled Beyond Miranda's meanings, Unsilencing the Demonic Ground of Caliban's Woman, published in 1990, she uses the notion of demonic grounds to represent the absent presence of black women using Shakespeare's The Tempest as a system of thinking. Instead of focusing on Caliban's mother as Aimé Césaire did in his rendition of The Tempest, Winter focused on Caliban's female peer, the woman of his kind. A woman who is so outside the bounds of Prospero's world of reason that she cannot even be imagined and so appears nowhere in the play. The demonic ground is thus a space not imagined and thereby radical in that it can reposition the governing fixed codes of the social order which are presented as the only option rather than merely one option amongst many. Social transformation emergent from the demonic ground, as Winter argued it, ushers in a new human discourse that goes beyond the master discourse of our governing privileged text and its subversions. Following through Sylvia Winter's No Humans Involved, an open letter to my colleagues written in 1992, was a call for academic disciplines to be interrogated for the ways that these fields discursively ignored, legitimized, and therefore sustained the kinds of social hierarchies that inevitably propagated racial violence. She passionately urged the academia to decode the symbolic violence that was encoded into disciplinary sense-making and proposed that 1. That we begin to notice the violence in the classrooms and research that we sustain. 2. That we question the disciplinary apparatus that makes it possible that racially subordinated students of color will experience racial violence at the site where they are supposed to be democratically educated. In her essay, Towards the Sociogenic Principle, Fanon Identity, The Puzzle of Conscious Experience, published in 2001, Sylvia Winter argues that when Frantz Fanon made the statement, beside phylogeny and androgyny stands sociogeny in black skin white masks, he effectively ruptured the present knowledge system that our academic disciplines serve to maintain by calling into question, and I quote, our present culture's purely biological definition of what it is to be and therefore what it is like to be human. This rupture that Fanon caused remains the space, Winter argues, that will necessarily move us out of our present Western European bioeconomic conception of human being, whereby the self requires an other for its definition, towards a hybrid nature culture conception that needs no other in order to understand its self. She elaborates more on her struggle for decoloniality, engaging with Curiano and Mignolo in her work titled Unsettling the Coloniality of Being, Power, Truth, Freedom, Towards the Human After Man, Its Overrepresentation and Argument. That is a long title. Coming on to the next author that I would like to introduce, it is Gloria Anzaldua, an American scholar of Chicana cultural theory, feminist theory, and queer theory, most famous for co-editing This Bridge Called My Back, Writings by Radical Women of Color, published in 1981, with Cherry Moraga, and the one of her semi-autobiographical works, Borderlands. In addition to providing the framework for new activist-based coalitions, this work called This Bridge, has had a considerable impact upon the world of academia for its linking of feminism, race, class, and sexuality. One of her major contributions was her introduction to the United States academic audiences of the term mestizaje. Okay, now I can spell the letter for you, mestizaje. Okay, meaning a state of being beyond binary, beyond the either or conception that into academic writing and discussion. In her theoretical works, Anzaldua called for a new mestiza, which she described as an individual aware of her conflicting and meshing identities, and uses these new angles of vision to challenge binary thinking proposed by colonial modernity. Her notion of borderlands has been significant in Mignolo's alternate decolonial vision of critical border thinking. Her Speaking in Tongues, a letter to third world women writers, is another touching evocation that was a strong pushback to imperial feminism. In her writing, Anzaldua uses a unique blend of 8 languages, 2 variations of English and 6 of Spanish, and theorized on what came to be known as linguistic terrorisms. Another author, Maria Lugones, the Argentine feminist philosopher and critic, has authored much on decoloniality, and the 2 most important ones to this topic being The Coloniality of Gender, published in 2008, and Towards a Decolonial Feminism in 2010. She deals in depth with decoloniality as put forward by Trujillo and Mignolo, and puts forth the idea of coloniality of gender, which she defines as the analysis of racialized capitalist gender oppression. Central to her argument is the definition and recognition of indigenous social structures and their relation to the land, and the articulation of how these epistemologies occupy an oppositional consciousness to colonial systems of social, sexual, ecological, spatial, and temporal hierarchy. Lugones describes this difference as the oppressing-resisting relationship. Lugones refers to these Western versus indigenous epistemologies as cosmologies in her Toward a Decolonial Feminism, where she analyzes these structures in relation to the colonial imposition of gender binaries on indigenous communities. Within Lugones' analysis of Mignolo's usage of the colonial difference in her assertion that colonial difference and the coloniality of gender is not an affair of the past. As such, as a contemporary phenomenon, Lugones argues that seeking parity with the colonizer by erasing colonial difference does not eliminate oppression. Instead, Lugones proposes a feminist border thinking that positions learning from subalternity at the colonial difference as central to decolonial feminism. In tandem with recent contributions by Native American intellectuals and some feminist and African anthropologists, among others, a non-gendered egalitarianism and gynocentric societies, Lugones raises questions about the validity of patriarchy as an intercultural category. That is clearly the case with African societies prior to colonization by the West, for which gender was not a central organizing principle of social life, or with some Native American groups for whom there exists a gynocratic spiritual plurality. She argues that narrowing the scope of gender to the control of sex and resources, as in much Western scholarship, is itself an aspect of gender domination. She states, and I quote, "The woman of the Western imperial colonial experience is not to be found in non-Western civilizations before the 1500s. This does not mean that neither that non-Western societies were non-patriarchal. It just means that in non-Western societies before 1500s, patriarchal or not, the concept of woman that assumes a white bourgeoisie subject did not exist." Lugones' contribution to the larger debate on gender and sexuality lies in her linking it with coloniality and vice versa. In this way, Lugones mutually enriches both frameworks. She does so by looking at the interconnections not just between race, gender, and sexuality, but by placing them in the imperial construction of the modern colonial world and the ongoing debates not only to decolonize imperial knowledge, but also, and more importantly, to generate decolonial knowledge. And with that, I come to the closure of the second part of the talk. And I was thinking, instead of reading on regarding how I look at Islamic Muslim gender assertions, or feminisms as it is called, with relation to decolonial theories. from what I have been trying to talk till now, how I am approaching the subject, or as whom, requires to be articulated, because that locates what I am going to speak about. So when I am engaging with the feminisms or the gender assertions that from the Muslim world, the Arab Muslim or Muslim worlds from all over the Ummah, is being categorized for, I would say it is for the sake of easiness that we, though it cannot be called something like feminism, we keep using, adding the term feminism along with Islam and Muslim communities to show the knowledge that has been produced from such a location, which talks about gender relations in Islam. Here, if we look at authors that we have so far seen academia engaging with, instead of going into a detailed analysis of what Islamic Muslim feminism is or who are the main authors, I think all of the researchers and learners sitting here has already passed that stage, so I need not repeat all those things. Instead of going to that, as a person belonging to academia, the space of academia, as well as a Muslim woman trying to engage with the spiritual possibilities that Islam offers, and also to speak, also to bring in the decolonial knowledge that is being produced and apply that to these concepts. That is how I would like to introduce myself into this conversation. Into this mix, that is the already produced body of work from the Muslim world or Muslim women's world, there has also been criticisms from the male scholars of the community, as well as from decolonial activists like Houria Boutelldja, etc., that Islamic feminism or Islamic Muslim feminism, by trying to explain that Islam is not patriarchal, that Islam is gender just, that Islam promotes equality between man and woman, is actually playing into the hands of how the discussion is already rigged. That is, to bring in all those theories that I talked about in the first part of the speech. We apply those to this, I think it is easier to understand. So by using, or just as Audre Lorde said, you cannot, or let us say when Houria Boutelldja or Keisha Ali is criticizing Islamic Muslim feminists of falling into this trap, let us say they are validated because, as Audre Lorde said, the master's tool cannot bring down the master's house. Okay, I agree with that much of the argument. But then, looking at the work that has been produced till now and trying to categorize them as I see it, from the point of view that I earlier introduced myself to be, I'd say authors like Muslim feminist authors, though at the beginning of their career they were not interested. I think I haven't yet found, I don't know, I haven't seen any Muslim or Islamic feminist, first of all, acknowledging the term feminist. They have all been serious, vehemently opposing this kind of a labeling, but then has agreed to go with the term because it becomes so easy when it comes to speaking about them. So, Amina Wudud and Barlas, Asma Barlas and Amina Wudud, in my conception, okay, they are Quran exegists. They have engaged with Quran and they have tried to bring forth or read Quran and Sunnah and tease out the elements that they consider shows the equality of man and woman in Islam. It is not the work, but rather I would say I want to point your attention towards the location from which they are speaking, not their ethnic identities or their as women of color or anything, but rather I think it is from it is half, let's say it is partly as Muslim women trying to engage with their spiritualities, trying to find out for themselves, okay, does God say this? Does Allah mean me to behave like this? Is these men of my community who are saying or placing these restrictions, is this what Allah meant for me to submit myself to? So we can see there is a constant engagement with the Quran and the Sunnah, in a sense, in one effect, to find personal answers as Muslim women. That is one side of their work. And having been introduced thus into the world of academic scholarship, they have contributed more, they have invested more of their energies into trying to put these questions of their personal self-fashioning into terms that others can relate to. And both these authors, they belong to the afterworld of colonial modernity. In that sense, okay, let me stop there. I'll come to it again. So that is where I place the work of these two authors. Coming to other very significant authors who has dealt with the same, let's say Margaret Badran is one historian who has traveled throughout different Muslim countries or Arab locations, and she has tried to do a very good job of seriously going through an anthropological kind of research and bringing to us many different life worlds of many different types of Muslim women. The difference between all these types of Muslim women have been recorded in their work. So it is a very significant addition to the repertoire. But again, I would like to look at the location of the author and then try to categorize it, wherein I would say Margaret Badran clearly marks herself as a subject outside the purview of the Muslim world. She positions herself completely outside, and it is a kind of an objective analysis of what she is producing. And in this production of knowledge, we can also see that she has gone about from her colonial modern knowledge background. She kinds of compares and pronounces claims that Islamic feminism does have very clear similarities with secular feminism. Let me say, this is the overview, or if I am to put it in a single sentence, this would be the addition that she makes to this field. And then, though not positioning themselves as feminists or not even positioning themselves as Muslims, two women certainly of Muslim names. Sabah Mahmood and Leela Abu Lugones has made very significant contribution, which can be taken as a decolonial knowledge production in bringing forth what the Muslim life worlds of women are at different locations. These works, again, it is not the work or the use that we could put these works to. I'd like to again point towards where they stand and how they look at the subjects that they are discussing. Again, these two women are not actually engaging with themselves as Muslim women or as themselves as invested in the project that they are talking about. I'm not trying to essentialize Muslim women's identities, but I'm trying to look at it as a Muslim woman myself who is trying to engage with Islam and gender relations, as well as trying to engage with the misogyny that exists in my community. So from that location, I have these different options in front of me. I would say these options, the options that I mentioned about to the end of the work, are incredulous anthropological works. They challenge the Eurocentric view. But can I write like that? Can the subject, the Muslim woman subject, invested in this question of how do I live my life as a Muslim woman? Can I travel alone to a distant country alone? Am I neglecting my duties as a wife when I am moving away from my house for 2 days to come and speak here? Of course, I am sharing knowledge. So that means either I am traveling to acquire knowledge, or either it is to share knowledge. So, is it right or wrong? As a very common Muslim woman from a middle class background, from the educational background that I stand, these are questions that I encounter every day and have managed successfully to somehow convince myself of different answers, but I would never go about giving instructions or providing fatwas. Okay, you can do this or you cannot do that in Islam as a Muslim woman. But that is the subject location from which I would like to engage in this process, and that is where I would like to introduce the work of Houria Boutelldja, the Algerian French Muslim woman activist. She is not an academician, but she is an activist, and she does great work. So when such a person acknowledges, yes, Islamic feminism or Muslim feminism is something that has done great work, but from a decolonial perspective, there is a problem of the terminology that is being used, the paradigm of equality and stuff. Somehow I disagree with the kind of reading that Islamic feminists have brought about, saying there is equality of genders. I would say that is a very murky way of trying to put across what or how you read the Quran. But Boutelldja's criticism would not have rattled me so much if it was not for the fact that we face misogyny in the world we live. So how do we go about trying to negotiate with the different powers? This is so. By bringing up these questions, as I was trying to mention in the abstract and with the organizers, I don't want to provide I don't want to provide, okay, this is the answer I have. We have arrived at a conclusion. Well, I think this is where we should be. Instead of that, I'm trying to problematize it. I'm trying to put the question open to the audience, female as well as male, how we could think about a decolonial feminist possibility from the location of a very vibrant Muslim culture that exists in Kerala. What is it that we can do? Can we think about the decolonial feminist methodology when it comes to Muslim women or women from our community? How far are we ready to challenge the limits of our understanding of religion as well as subjecthood? And these questions, they do come from personal experiences, wherein every time my younger brothers and sisters with whom I have engaged in conversations, who have been very lovingly supporting, promoting, encouraging all kinds of work that we do. Even there, whenever the gender question comes in, I have felt you either label the woman who is talking as being influenced by Western feminism, so that whatever she wants to raise, however much you say it is from what I have read and personally understood from the Quran, it is easily neglected. And then recently I found the decolonial question being thrown in, and Houria Boutelldja's work being thrown at me, and my younger brothers asking me, okay, so how do you look at this and what do you propose? That again makes me think, what do you suggest is the answer. I want the male part of the audience to engage with it and say, okay, so what do you suggest would be? Because I know the women, as women, we already have answers. We have been living our lives according to those answers. But it is, I think, the men in the community that needs to come to terms with the misogyny that exists with. I'm not just making claims, because just to cite an example from, I hope I'm not taking too much time. Okay, just for the sake of an example, wherein in a conference that I participated in in December, after a female panel, me and a younger female scholar, we had just got down from the stage, and one male senior, or let's say in his early 40s or late 40s, he comes to this younger scholar, greets her with a hi because they already know each other, and the next thing he tells her is, "Ningalude paper njan kettilla, njan orangayirunnu." This is what he told the girl, the scholar. It is not a girl, I would say she is a scholar who writes prolifically, who engages with the academic world prolifically, and I did see him sitting and sleeping there, and I'm standing with her. I don't mind that somebody sits and sleeps in the room, because as teachers, I think we all have had these students who sit in our classes and sleep. But this male person who calls himself an Islamic, he doesn't call himself, he is an activist working at the forefront of a reformist organization, and he comes up to this scholar and says, this is the next thing that he says after a hi. What are we to expect? What kind of decolonial toppling of the world do we expect? Are these the men that we think are going to bring down a Brahmanical Savarna world and um, end or make things beautiful. This is not a challenge or an outburst from a scholar, but this is rather the or I'd say kind of, I don't know how to express what I feel regarding this. Anyway, it's not positive. That's all. There was also another example that I wanted to share. Of course, I know most of you might know that person, but there was recently a photo circulating in Facebook where a lot of people were saying, mashallah, there is a group of female students doing their namaz on top of a hill, on top of a rock. Yeah, I see my very young active sister Rafia sitting there. So it was a photo shared by Rafia Sharon and of her friends and her performing namaz on top of a rock. So the first thing you look at the photo, I look at the photo and what I see is, wow, these girls, yeah, they have not, it is not the girl part of it that I champion, but the first thing is I think, yes, see, even if they are chilling, they are enjoying, they don't forget their namaz. There are times, because every day there are times when I think all of us, that is it. ഓരോ നന്മ കുറയും തോറും ഹൃദയത്തിൽ കറുത്ത കുത്ത് വീണുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കും എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞതുപോലെ കോൺസ്റ്റന്റ്ലി നമ്മൾ തന്നെ സ്പിരിച്വാലിറ്റി റീവർക്ക് ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കണം എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് പോലെ എല്ലാ ദിവസവും 5 നേരവും എന്തിനു ഒതു കൊടുക്കണം, 5 നേരവും എന്തിനു നിസ്കരിക്കണം, അതൊരു സെൽഫ് ഫാഷനിങ്, ഒരു റിലീജിയസ് സെൽഫ് ഫാഷനിങ് ആയിട്ട് കൊണ്ട് നടക്കണം എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് പോലെ ഹിജാബ് ധരിക്കുന്നത് ഒരു റിലീജിയസ് സെൽഫ് ഫാഷനിങ് ആണ് ആസ് എ മോഡസ്റ്റ് വുമൺ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് പോലെ തന്നെ ഞാൻ ഇമ്പോർട്ടൻ്റ് ആയി കാണുന്ന ഒന്നാണ് പ്രാർത്ഥനകളോട് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ പ്രാർത്ഥനാ സമയങ്ങളോട് നമ്മൾ കാണിക്കുന്ന പ്രതിബദ്ധത. ഐ ഡോണ്ട് നോ, നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ഇവിടെ അത് വളരെ റാഡിക്കലായി തോന്നുന്നില്ലായിരിക്കാം, കാരണം എനിക്കറിയില്ല, സിൻസ് ഐ ആം ലൊക്കേറ്റഡ് അറ്റ് ട്രിവാൻഡ്രം വേർ ഇറ്റ് ഇസ് നോട്ട് എ മുസ്ലിം milieu. Personally, how I look at it is, wow, they are outside, but they are performing the namaz. This is what I see. The next thing that I see in the image is, wow, my sisters are traveling. They are together, they are traveling. So that is again something that as a woman I enjoy. But then suddenly there is a barrage of comments, there is a barrage of tirades which keeps negating everything that girl as a woman stands for. It doesn't matter that she is in a hijab. It doesn't matter that she is praying. It doesn't matter that she is an activist. It doesn't matter that she has contributed a lot to the community. Only thing that matters is this Muslim woman is outside and she is roaming around and she is making a projection of the fact and circulating it on FB. This is the only factor that was being talked about. So these things need to be addressed within the community for a serious change to occur within the milieu of the community. Because when it comes to the larger question, as the black feminists said, as decolonial feminists like Boutelldja keep saying, yes, we need to stand as a whole and speak against the oppressor and try to bring down the oppressive system, but we can't leave these smaller questions that we have to the other part of the community. That is something that Muslim women has been very devotedly doing, I would say. And when they do not fit to that norm, we have seen what happens with those persons and such articulations. I think somehow there are a lot of points that were there during the travel. Somehow I lost it. So anyway, I think in the discussions there will be a lot of interaction. I hope there will be a lot of questions and a lot of rather than questions, I think I am the one asking the questions, and I am asking the rest of the hall to give me not answers but at least pointers on how we could work towards a decolonial world.